Warning, Star Trek from the Holodeck contains adult language and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not continue to listen.
Lock and load!
Fire!
Holodeck 3 program is reinstated.
Open sesame!
Commander Klingon vessel. We are energizing transporter beam. Now.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Star Trek from the Holodeck, the Discovery Edition, Rainman Digital's exclusive Star Trek fan show. Be sure to subscribe to us via iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or Spotify. Yeah, we're everywhere. How are you doing today, David?
Doing good. Feeling logical.
Yeah. Now, today we have a very exciting episode to break down. Season 2, Episode 2 of Star Trek Discovery, titled New Eden.
My God.
Yeah, Dave. Another episode of Star Trek Discovery is in the can, and we've got a lot to talk about this week. Tackling this show is never easy. There's always so much to get through, even last season. And with this episode, there was very little time wasted, which I can appreciate from an academic standpoint when it comes to the writing. The pacing was tight, concise, and moved the story along. The use of philosophy and debate this week was fucking amazing. This was Star Trek at its best. And if you disagree, I just don't know what you're watching.
Yeah, my stance would be, do you know what Star Trek is all about?
And I know we're calling shots lately, right? And we've been calling shots. We've been firing shots, I should say, and calling out names when it comes to Star Trek Discovery, saying, hey, if you don't understand what they're doing, then I don't know what the fuck's wrong with you. But this is one of those episodes, and I'm firing shots again. Shots are fired, Dave. There's a warning shot. I'm not trying to shoot
right
anybody.
Across the bow.
Yeah, right across the bow. But the use of philosophy and debate this week, this is what Star Trek is built on. The focus on the crew, everyone's getting their due. Detmer, Swoken, I hope I just said her name right. Rurium, hope I say her name right. Saru, Tilly, and of course Burnham and Pike. I really love how they're using the crew and not just having them be simple task doers in the background that they utilize when it's convenient for the story. But no, this season we're getting all of these characters as contributing members of the crew.
And dude, I like the fact that they're finally referring to everyone's names. I like the fact that Pike literally addresses, his two ensigns by their names, not like ensign, go this way. No, he actually refers to them as their character names, and it helps. It brings this crew together.
Yeah, and that's something that was missing. And I know some of what we say is very hyperbolic at times when we're breaking down Star Trek Discovery, but something that was amiss last season was the contributing crew. Except for a few key faces or key names, we really didn't have a crew. It was more centered solely on Burnham, and then she would, through her own tasks or need of doing tasks, she would come up. They would pair her up with the appropriate guest spot for that week. But there were characters like Detmer and Awoskan and Arium that weren't even utilized. In fact, we didn't even really know their name last year. So yet again, Alice Kurtzman, along with Jonathan Frakes, is bringing these background players to the front, because in Star Trek, the crew is just as important as our captains and our lead.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's why this episode, again, Jonathan Frakes, he understands the strength of Star Trek is not just based on the individual. It's based on the collective of the crew. Because every single series, you look at the crew, you never say, I just watched Star Trek for Captain Kirk. No, there's Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Uhura, Sulu, all of them. Same thing with TNG. There's Picard, there's Riker, there's Data, there's Worf. It's just not Picard. And on with all the other series. It's all based on a collective of individuals working together to make or save the day.
Yeah. So what they're doing this year with the crew is definitely working. And we're only 2 episodes in, so I'm very excited to see what they continue to do as we progress. We also got our first away team mission of season 2, and it led to some big questions, some very big questions, revelations, and it might have answered, or at the very least clued us in as to who the Red Angel is. And it looks as if Earth's first contact happened long before the Vulcans stumbled upon Cochrane's warp engine, as the writers are weaving the African folklore that we discussed last week into this season's narrative. And Pike, once again, with the best line of the episode: "If you're telling me this ship can skip across the universe on a highway made of mushrooms, I kind of have to go on faith."
That was like one of my favorite lines he told Saru.
Yeah, I mean, not only was Anson Mount's delivery spot on, but it also kind of set the tone for the themes we'd be exploring throughout the episode.
Not only that, it also gave characterization to Pike, because that's one of the biggest things they have.
They still got to build them, right?
They still got
a character build.
Captain Pike, because just like what Anson Mount said in that interview that we discussed in one of our prior shows, this is Pike before we see him in the pilot. So this is a young Captain Pike who's learning the reins as captain. And this is his middle age. It's not his younger self.
His second act.
It's his second act, yeah. And like, that's why I really dig Anson Mount's portrayals again in the second episode, because like, he's giving life to a character that we barely even knew. We didn't know Captain Pike even in the reboot of J.J. Abrams' reboot. Captain Pike was just seen as kind of like this fatherly figure to Captain Kirk. That's it.
And it worked for what they were trying to do with that story.
Because that was Pike in his later years. That was Pike in, if we were to take it in Anson Mount's perspective, his third act.
Yeah.
This is his second act. This is where he has his adventures with his crew, has the adventures with the Enterprise. We know nothing about him.
Yeah, and we'll get into that, because that's going to be a large portion of our discussion this week is how they're utilizing Pike and whether or not it works with the dual narrative with Burnham. All right, so this episode, Dave, as we had alluded to at the top of the show, did bring back one of Star Trek's favorite directors and actors, Jonathan Frakes. He did in fact direct this week's episode, and they brought him back for a fun episode that was also laden with some heavy thought that posed some very real world questions. Many felt like it was drawing a line in the sand. I did some reading on social media and saw that there were people complaining. Many felt like it was drawing a line in the sand, religious versus science, but I felt like it was more about religion as science, or science as religion, opposed to one is wrong and the other is right, or vice versa. It was more about the conjunction of the two working in tandem, how theoretically they could in fact be one and the same.
Yeah, the perspective of the two,
right.
Honestly, because like it's funny that basically a lot of people just automatically draw and say it's religion versus science. No, that's not what it should be about. It's about how the two can actually coincide with each other. You know, how myths I can't even say that right. Myths and legends can actually have some science behind them.
Absolutely. And especially when you take into account Pike's use of Arthur C. Clarke's third law, where it states any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah.
And the fictionalized updated law that he also shared with us, any advanced extraterrestrial intelligence is indistinguishable from God. I thought that was a very fucking powerful statement. And it's all about perspective and context. And to see Pike make the hard decisions as a captain this week and mull over these very philosophical ideals in order to come to a solution on how to handle the immediate situation they were in, as is an exceptional piece of Trek. These types of questions feel like Star Trek V. If you remember that movie, we also had another sibling of Spock who was trying to find the balance between logic, emotion, truth, science, and religion. It makes me wonder if we will also meet Sybok this season, because it feels, to me, and we might have said this last week, Dave, but to me, it would feel a little insincere if we're tackling a sibling story, right?
Yeah.
Dealing with faith. Alex Kurtzman has said that's one of the general themes they're working with this year. You're dealing with faith, the idea of faith, and you just remove Sybok out of that equation. I kind of feel like we have to see some Sybok. They are building up Spock's mythos in a way that none of us ever expected, and it would feel strange if we continue to delve into Spock's past this way without at least a mention of his brother Sybok. I'm not saying I want our story to be weighed down with yet another character. Hey, let's bring Sybok in. Let's bring so-and-so in. I'm just saying that it would feel strange, because we all know Star Trek canon, that he never mentions, or even Sarek, or possibly even Burnham. Someone's got to mention. It would feel weird if they don't bring up Sybok as an individual, since he was in fact a big part of one film.
It makes sense why Sarek doesn't bring it up at all, because that's in Star Trek V. You kind of get the illusion that Sarek kind of saw Sybok as like his, for a better term, bastard son, because it was from a white. It was from a different wife than Amanda. Than what he sired, and it would make sense that Burnham doesn't know anything about Sybok, because Sarek never would have told her, because the way he views Sybok is it's his bastard son.
Yeah, but you have to remember, Dave, when you have a character that was raised by Sarek, he was raised, wasn't a bastard son that he hid away in the towers in a dungeon. This was a kid he raised, and it wasn't until he became an adult and he decided to embrace his emotions like the Vulcan ancestors. And it wasn't until then that he was banished, and he wasn't to return to Vulcan, because of course they were afraid of his thoughts and what it would mean to the Vulcan culture. That being said, you have Sarek, who brings Burnham into their family. You have Sybok, who he brought into their family. It would feel strange if we were just to ignore it as if it never existed. And I don't give a fuck of what people's thoughts are in Star Trek V. That doesn't matter. I don't care if you like. I don't care if you thought it was an F-graded film or an A+ graded film. The point is that it is a part of Star Trek canon, and it exists. We can't just pretend it doesn't. It doesn't. So that being said, I'm hoping we get some type of mention, just so that it feels more consistent with the overall canon of Star Trek. On that note, Dave, let's go to a very quick break, and then when we get back, we're going to break down the entire second episode of season 2, titled New Eden. We'll be right back.
Cry havoc! And let's slip the dogs of war! Everything!
What are you looking at, nerd? Huh?
I thought I was looking at my mother's old douchebag, but that's in Ohio.
Geek Out Saturday.
But at the same time, then you wouldn't have this feeling that, okay, so Lucifer's just what? Sitting on his hands and knees?
With King Shark, I was getting a shark tattoo. And, I watched the episode after.
The way it ended. I mean, you end it with Rey climbing the mountain, holding out the lightsaber to Luke. And
funny that some of my favorite Westerns are coming from the Euro countries. To this day, directors and writers are able to bring the heat in terms of American.
I mean, don't get me wrong, Mad Max was really good, but they washed out a lot of it to kind of hide the special effects that they were doing.
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Catch up on your favorite Rain Man digital geek shows every Saturday. DC on CW, Back to Tank, Weird West Radio, The Crossroads, and more. Geek Out Saturday on Rain Man Channel 001. Listen from the Rain Man digital app or tune in Just search RM Channel 001.
Free stuff is awesome, but free stuff that will spice up your bedroom is even better. Just go to adamandeve.com and select almost any one item for 50% off, and then we'll load on the free stuff. Just enter this very exclusive code, DEAL30 at checkout, and you'll get 10 tantalizing free gifts, including a sexy item for him, a special toy for her, and a third item you'll both enjoy. And for your viewing pleasure, 6 free spicy movies on DVD, plus free shipping! Always sent in discreet packaging. So go to adamandeve.com now. Get 50% off plus 10 free gifts when you enter the exclusive offer code DEAL30. Again, that's DEAL30, because without it, no free stuff. That's DEAL30 at adamandeve.com.
Energize.
All right, hello everyone. Welcome back to Star Trek from the Holodeck, the Discovery Edition. Time to break down Season 2, Episode 2, titled New Eden, directed by the one and only Jonathan Frakes, and written by Vaughn Wilmot and Sean Cochran. The synopsis: a new signal brings the Discovery to a distant planet, New Eden, that is inhabited by the descendants of human survivors of World War III, which was fought on Earth 200 years earlier. All right, so this week, the Discovery powers up the spore drive again, but this time to reach a signal deep within the Beta Quadrant. And this is the catalyst for the rest of the episode's narrative. It answered some questions early on, and I'm thankful. Although we do not know exactly what or who the Red Angel is, writer Sean Cochran shed light on this season's myth arc far sooner than I had expected, but also maintaining the intrigue and mystery. They gave us just enough. They fed us just enough of those breadcrumbs that we would be satisfied temporarily. You and I had theorized that they would connect the story of the Khoisan girl from Africa, from the folklore, to the narrative, and that they would either draw some parallels or they would directly connect their belief structure to the Red Angel. And it looks like we were on the right track. Whatever this Red Angel is or could be, it could be the very thing that all religion is based on. This is a common thought as well among, and I hate this terminology, but I'm going to use it, the common thought among ancient astronaut theorists and some scientists that the similarities of all the religions across the globe is due in part because of its true source.
Yes. And
in this case, it could be the Red Angel.
I wouldn't be surprised if they did. They were, because like when you bring that up philosophically, it fits. It really does, especially when you take into context that scene within the church when they're looking at the stained glass windows and they're basically mentioning, oh, look at these collections of religions all as one.
Pretty much all of Earth's main religions were represented in that stained glass window.
And then like Burnham, I think it was Burnham or Pike that was reading through the scriptures and basically noticed that what this culture did was they just took a bunch of scriptures from all different religions, combined them together to make them into one religion, which fit perfectly like a perfect puzzle. And it gives a lot of credence to the thought process that, oh, all religions are connected by one complete source.
And Gene Roddenberry has always messed with similar themes. I can't definitively say it was religion, necessarily just religion, but he has messed with the whole idea that for the most part, all of us have come from one place.
Yeah, he did that in TNG with like it was one series of episodes where they find out that all the genes of all the races have one very distinct similarity.
Yeah.
And it all leads into one central race.
Yeah, so they're dabbling, the writers of Discovery are dabbling in similar areas that TNG went. And I feel like it definitely works for the purpose of this story and the whole theme of faith. And if this is the case, this could be a great way to really drive home the importance of General Order 1, or better known as the Prime Directive. To think that our entire civilization evolution, I should say, to think that our entire civilization's evolution was contaminated by a being of higher intelligence. All the wars started by religious ideology. Yeah. What a powerful message if they go about it this way.
Well, yeah.
And of course, this is just speculation based on what we saw this week. And it can, at this point, 2 episodes in, it can go really in any direction. Now, all of this and what they laid out for us in this episode, it changes canon a bit, but it doesn't retcon any of it. It seems to expand and build upon moments we've heard of throughout the years. Would seem like, I don't know, it would seem like First Contact actually happened thousands and thousands of years ago, and more recently within the Star Trek timeline during World War III. This changes a lot of what we know in terms of the past of Star Trek. But I have always loved the Prime Directive debate because it's such a great tool to advance the idea of philosophical thought when it comes to natural, organic steps of a sentient species. It's been the backbone of many Trek episodes, except Enterprise, of course, when Archer just went around kicking over Hornets' Nest.
When Archer drew, ooh, what is this?
Oh, a new star system.
I'm going to go that way.
And yet Trip trying to fuck every alien he found, never even thinking about the Prime Directive.
Can I put my penis here?
Yeah, do you remember how excited they would get on away missions for women? They're like, oh, some chicks, some hot alien chicks. Yeah, so Enterprise, they were in a different territory because the Prime Directive, or the Federation hadn't been formed yet.
Yeah.
But they were already setting down the groundwork for the importance of the Prime Directive because of the Hornet's Nest that Archer kicked over and the problems he created with certain cultures. And T'Pol would warn him about messing with cultures of, pre-warp cultures.
Yeah.
So in this episode, they used it as a thread that kept the entire narrative consistent and together. And I have to say that I really like what they did with Pike and the internal struggle they created, and the differing thoughts and opinions between Burnham and the captain was a great way to create debate.
Yeah.
And there's a message here as well. It has a lot to do with perspective and context, which is something I continually preach on all of our shows, that context is king. Perspective is very important. Who are we to come in and assume we know what this angel is to them?
Yes.
Pike was not satisfied with Burnham's dismissive attitude toward the human survivor's set of ideology. And it's not that Pike is some true believer or zealot.
Yeah.
He's a captain, and the writers showed us how a captain thinks.
Yeah.
And this is going to touch on a little bit what you alluded to at the top of the show about how different he is as a captain. This is what the writers were doing. They were trying to flesh Pike out to show the audience what type of person he is. You can't just move forward based on your own beliefs and or emotional knee-jerk reactions. A situation like this is worth fully understanding before you even attempt to get involved. And that was the lesson Pike taught Burnham this week. It's not about what you think. It's about what they think and what your thoughts are going to do to their culture.
Exactly.
It was a very powerful message.
It is, because I think a lot of Star Trek fans don't truly understand what the Prime Directive means and why it is important. Because the Prime Directive is really important, but a lot of Star Trek fans, let's just break the Prime Directive constantly.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, you guys don't understand the importance of the Prime Directive. Is you are influencing a culture based on your own beliefs, meaning you are forcing your own thoughts and your own beliefs on a culture that has its own thoughts and beliefs, but you're altering it based on your beliefs. when you think about it, that's not right.
And it's not right, Dave. You're exactly spot on. It's not right. No matter how we think, no matter how right we think we are,
yes,
or no matter how right we are, that's not the point.
That's not the point.
And that's the message that Gene Roddenberry was trying to get across all those many years ago when he came up with this idea of General Order 1 and the Prime Directive. Because, as we know, Roddenberry's a thinker. He always has been. Star Trek is built on his own set of ideology and philosophical thought.
Yes.
And it's a very powerful message that has a lot more to do with real life opposed to just Star Trek in itself. It's a message on politics, political and military arrogance as well. We as Americans, the American society, I love America, so let me just say that. But I can also see it from a realistic point of view. American society, we stick our nose in everybody's business because we assume we know what's best for the world. But do we ever stop to think about the people that are affected by our own arrogance and our self-righteous behavior? I mean, all we have to do is look past our own borders to see just how real this is. Not saying that we don't, I'm not saying that what we do as an American society doesn't secure peace, because it absolutely does, and it gives us a better way of life. But there is also another side. There's always another side, and it's worth exploring.
Yes.
And that's what the Prime Directive is about. It's about the contamination, not about your own thoughts. It's about the contamination of a society and what type of ramifications it's going to have on them. History is littered with accounts where more advanced cultures will mesh and assimilate another culture that is not nearly advanced, and it destroys the culture that was assimilated, and they never can reach their full potential. Or what we see in today's world, I call ourselves the kingmakers. The United States has propped themselves up as kingmakers, and whenever we feel like a government agency is no longer working in alignment with democracy or what we perceive as democracy, what do? We knock them out of their position of power
and install our own regime.
Yes. And that's another message of the Prime Directive. It's all one and the same.
Yeah.
That's why this message is so vital. This episode was really powerful, and it stresses the importance of debate, restraint, and communication, something that many of us currently struggle within this country.
Oh, yeah. And the one thing I want to point out, too, is the Prime Directive is more, because a lot of people also think that, well, it's about tolerance. No, it's more than just having tolerance. It's having an understanding. It's having
a form of empathy.
A form of empathy.
Tolerance has nothing to do with it.
Tolerance has nothing to do with it. It's more than just tolerance. It's about understanding that way that is how that culture is created. They'll find their own way, you know? The example that I was thinking was if Pike were to actually break the Prime Directive at this point, he would destroy everything that culture believes in, just because to him or to people around him, it's the right thing to do because we have to bring these people back to Earth. They've been there for hundreds of years. They're not Earthlings anymore. They're that planet.
Yes, Dave.
Culture.
That's exactly my line of thinking as well. You're absolutely right. And there was a debate online that I was reading that I found pretty interesting. It was actually a pretty good discussion. And the debate was whether or not the Prime Directive was null and void due to the fact that the Red Angel already involved themselves into our culture and contaminated our own natural evolution. But I'd counter this statement by saying pretty much what you just said, Dave. I'm going to strengthen that idea a bit. 200 years is a long fucking time.
Yes.
And a long time for a new culture to develop, and interference could very well destroy them as a people. Imagine your entire belief structure tipped upside down. You're not going to no one's going to escape that unscathed.
No.
When your entire world and what you understand of the galaxy is completely flipped upside down and you're not mentally prepared for that. They were not knowledgeable of the stars before they were abducted either.
Yeah.
They built a belief structure on their experience. So even though the human civilization on Earth, the human society has evolved and they're aware of the galaxy and the stars, these people were abducted before any of that was a reality. Their evolution has
stunted.
Yes, has been stunted because of that. And we don't know what these hundreds, thousands of people, was it thousands at this point? We just don't know.
I think it was 100.
Yeah, you just don't know what it would do to a culture like this. So I stand by the fact, I stand by what the writers did this week and make it without a doubt. It's a prime directive situation. But once again, let me state that it's not really about one thing. They're not trying to say this is what you should do. They were in fact trying to create a dialogue and a discussion by the way they set it up. And Captain Pike, once again this week, as we had mentioned, doesn't disappoint, Dave. Just switching gears a little bit here. They're using him very wisely. The writers are being very smart. I like how Burnham is learning from him. And like a good captain should, he's got lessons for her to learn. Yes. And to teach her. Just brilliant. There was a moment in that basement that felt like the original series when Kirk, Spock, and Bones would discuss, argue, and debate the philosophical nuances of a situation. And that's exactly what Burnham and Pike were doing this week. And I love that Burnham was also, it showed a lot of growth for her as well as a character, because last year at this same time, what did she do when she disagreed with her captain and she thought she was right no matter what? She pulled a gun out on her captain.
Yeah, disobeyed her captain.
Disobeyed her captain. And you can see that she's learning from her mistakes. And she backed up her captain's play.
Well, I like the fact that even Burnham brought that up. Is like, remember at the very end, Pike mentions I like the relationship between Pike and Burnham, because Pike at that very end basically says, hey, I just want to say thank you for not disobeying my orders to keep General Rule 1 in play.
Yeah.
And Burnham says, well, I've learned my lesson of actually disobeying.
Damn right. You started a war last time, Burnham.
Yeah. And yeah, it was, you could kind of say it was kind of in tongue in cheek about the whole thing. But you also could see that basically Burnham has learned that lesson, that basically there's a reason why he's calling the play, and why you got to listen. You got to listen to others.
Yeah.
It's not just about you. It's about thinking outside of you and keeping everyone's perspective in this.
Yes, you're spot on, because this episode was very heavy. It weighed heavy on anyone with the ability to have empathy. It really did. That was the point, is to empathize with the people you're dealing with. And one thing that really played into that really helped me as an audience, as a viewer, to empathize with these people was actor Andrew Moody, who played Joseph, the scientist.
Yeah.
I mean, holy Christ, he was so good. You could feel his pain, the pain and the desperation of needing to know the truth about their origins, the truth about where they came from.
Yeah.
I mean, these ideas of existentialism is exactly what many of us do. We ponder our importance and our place, our roots, and where we come from. It's a very natural part of the human condition. Curiosity and exploration, both literal and abstract, these are always the components of much of the best Trek stories to date. They really utilize those ingredients and, in my opinion, hit this episode out the park.
It was a brilliant narrative callback to Brightest Star. When you watch Saru was like Joseph, and you feel for Joseph. I mean, the problem with the Prime Directive is it takes into account about the majority, not the minority. Let's not sugarcoat it. We all feel for Joseph, but at the end of the day, he's just one person out of the whole collective.
Yeah.
And yeah, he'll handle it fine. But the problem is, what about all the others? They're not going to handle it fine. That one lady that leads them, that's that preacher type.
She's a true believer, and those people are dangerous. She's a true believer.
And when you destroy someone's beliefs, can you imagine the damage that would do to a person like that? That would send them over the edge.
Yeah.
That might drive them crazy.
Dude, it was quite the balancing act this week with all the posing of questions, both ethical and moral. It was really good. Just a great job.
And I was really happy with the conclusion of how Pike handled it in the end. It showed his
prowess as a captain.
Yeah. And not just as a captain, but as a human being, basically saying, okay, I'm not going to tell you what this is, the power cell that he gives Joseph, but I'm going to do a trade. This thing will power you for a very long time. He doesn't give him any schematics. He doesn't give him anything. But he says, this will power you for a long time. All I want to do is trade for that helmet because that's my mission. And it was brilliant because he doesn't break the Prime Directive.
Yeah, they're doing a really good job with Pike. I feel like I think the writers have a really good handle on what they want to do with this character, and they're finding really great ways to flesh him out. They're not just giving him an entire episode and say, all right, the whole focus on you is going to be 3 or 4 episodes, and then we're going to learn who you are.
Right.
They're piecemealing it. And last week they did great. They made great moves in to humanize Pike and make him charismatic. And then this week they added even more to that. They managed to humanize him that much more. He became very real and not just a likable person like he was last episode, but he became a person with feelings and emotions. And you could see the pain in his face when he wanted to help this guy out. He wanted to help them out as well, but he knew that he had to stick true. He had to stick by General Order 1. You cannot break that no matter what. Doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what you think. It matters about that law. That law is the backbone of the Federation. If we bend it, all will be lost. We cannot bend that. I love the strength of that aspect because it did wonders to flesh out Pike.
It did wonders to flesh out Pike, and as I said, it helped strengthen the belief in the Prime Directive, because the Prime Directive is something that a lot of Star Trek fans just toss aside, in my opinion. They just don't. They never follow it. They think it's wrong. A lot of them think it's wrong, morally. But
why is it wrong?
Because a lot of in some discussions I've read about the
it's unfair. Is it fair?
It's unfair. You always hear that.
Why does one species have everything and another does not?
Yeah.
We should all have the same thing.
And you don't understand that basically. Well, if you affect someone based on your beliefs, you're essentially basically wiping out what makes that person.
People that think that, Dave, are the very people we're talking about in this episode. I'm not saying anything bad about them as individuals, but that very line of thinking that the Prime Directive is wrong is American arrogance.
Yes.
It's American arrogance. It's like, hey, we are right. You should be just like us, no matter what. You should have everything we have. But hold on a second. If you look at history, let's specifically look at the Middle East and how we have tried to put democracy in that part of the world for decades, and it never holds because some people just don't connect with the American ideals. It's very different. It's a very, thank you, David, line of thinking. It's a very different set. It's a very different mindset. And I'm not saying communism is better than democracy. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that some people need time to understand what it means to be a part of a democracy. And the same thing could be said about the Prime Directive in Star Trek. And that's the lesson Star Trek teaches. And this is why I've always been drawn to Star Trek, because of these types of lessons. And they're not soapbox moments. They're not those moments where, they get on their little box and they point down at you and say you're a horrible person. These aren't soapbox moments. These are real moments that actually happen in history, and they're using them to teach us lessons in a fictionalized way, in a science fiction story. Yes. It works. And that's why Star Trek has always been relevant, no matter what decade you're watching it, because Star Trek has always been governed by a set of ideology, and it works. Let's move past this. Let's switch gears. Let's talk about Spock. Time to move on. We're getting way too preachy. Let's talk about Spock. He's in a psychiatric unit, apparently. we got crazy Spock here.
Which I think is awesome.
He placed himself there, and also Spock and the map of the 7 red signals were stored in his computer long before the signals had actually appeared on the Federation's sensor scans.
Yep.
So what does this mean? What's the connection to Spock? And will it be something truly relevant to Spock as an individual? When you intrinsically tie something this big to Spock, it has to have character-defining ramifications. It would be interesting if this becomes an origin story of sorts for Spock.
Yes.
Whatever happens in these episodes, Dave, are the ingredients to making Spock who he is when we are first introduced to him all those many years ago in the original series. And if this is the direction they're going, I will co-sign and be on board, because I've been hesitant. That's not a mystery or a secret to anybody. I've been very hesitant about the introduction of Spock and what they're going to do with him, because I don't want it to change our perspective of him in the original series and, of course, the movies.
That's why I think it's really important. I think doing this honestly feels right for the character of Spock, even for the how we know Spock. If Dave, if they do it in the way that it looks like they're doing it, meaning he needs to have relevance to the story, and because you're bringing him in, not only does he have to be relevant to the story, like fully relevant, like he is the center of this mystery, then it also needs to be a character-defining moment. It has to be the path that leads them to the Spock that we know. If this becomes an origin story for the Spock we know, then I'm fucking happy. Oh yeah.
If they end up doing that.
That's why I actually feel that they are heading that way, because like when you look at the past moments of Spock that we all know already, Spock is the type of person that would lock himself up in a penitentiary ward, because you got to remember, like, the very beginning of Star Trek the Motion Picture, what is Spock doing? He's in meditation on Vulcan, and for some strange reason gets this sense of urgency because something important in the galaxy is about to happen. And that's why he comes back into the story in the motion picture. Same thing with Voyage Home. He connects with the freaking whales. Or even though those beings, he's called to some greater, higher purpose.
You mean George and Gracie?
George and Gracie. But he's called to a higher purpose. And this, the Red Angel moment, I think could be like the start of that origin of like, why is Spock always called to these moments in history where he's really needed? Like, say, for example, even in the J.J. Abrams one, the reboot, Spock is called to help the Romulans because randomly he realizes, oh my God, a supernova is going to explode and kill that planet.
Okay, so hold on a second. Let me backtrack, because I'm actually really interested in what you're saying. So are you speculating that they're building not just a destiny for Spock, but they're building a potential deep connection to a deep connection of his destiny to the things and events that are of importance within the galaxy?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
So you're saying it's spiritual, or it's predestined by some
entity that basically chose Spock? Because
sounds interesting. But you are right.
In the first episode,
Spock is drawn to some pretty big...
Spock is drawn to a lot of weird things that happen in the Star Trek universe, even in TNG.
I mean, he was the one responsible for the Klingon peace accord.
You know,
Kirk was really mad at him.
Yeah,
for doing it. I mean, you're right. I mean, there is something there. It could be some very heavy speculation, and the writers of Discovery might be listening right now and laughing that we're really going overboard with it. But, I mean, with a show like Star Trek, honestly, anything's possible as long as it's done the right way.
Anything's possible if it's done the right way. And when you take a look at Spock, Spock has always been portrayed as a very special character. Like, even in the first episode of Discovery, the second season, they alluded to the fact that Spock is different from many of the Vulcans that Sarek and Amanda deal with. Yeah, he's a child of two worlds, but there's something very special about him. Like you see him doing all these special things with the holo projectors and stuff like that. And
do you think he's autistic? I am being serious. There was an article that I saw, and I just started laughing. Like, are they trying to say Spock is on the spectrum this season and that he's autistic and that's why he acts a certain way?
There's a thought process that basically people on the spectrum are very special, that they basically have a special talent.
Yeah, if it looks like we're going in that direction, then we'll talk about that a bit more, because I have a lot to say about that as well, especially when it comes to the natural evolution of humankind. A lot of scientists are starting to think that possibly the rise of autism is something we shouldn't fight against. It actually might be the next stage in human evolution. So let's put a pin in that, because that's a heavy discussion.
But I say that basically the way they're portraying Spock right now is like it's how to form this character's destiny. It's his destiny to be this special person that is constantly there at the center of all of like the calamities.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds very romantic and sweet if you love Spock, but
it makes Spock a hero.
Yeah, but we can't disrupt the importance of Kirk. If you build up this grand destiny that stalks Spock, then suddenly you take away from the importance of Kirk as well. So they gotta, whatever. I'm not saying they can't do it, Dave. Yeah. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that if they do go down that route, they got to be very, very delicate on how they do it. Otherwise, it could be a convoluted mess.
Yeah, I think that's why J.J. Abrams' reboot was actually brilliant in that regard, is showing the importance of not just Kirk and Spock and their relationship, but the importance of Kirk to Spock. Their friendship is what makes them who they are.
I agree. That was a great part of that.
That was a fantastic part of all three of those movies, is the fact that we're watching
each other.
They need each other. Not in a funny way, but actually in a very dramatic character developed way, that these two characters with their skills as individuals, they're fantastic, but together they need each other.
Yeah, there's nothing they can't accomplish together.
They can't accomplish anything together, or they can't accomplish anything together.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about Hugh Culber. Our former doctor is still alive in some way. The explanation probably needs to be fleshed out in greater detail a bit later, but for now it works. The idea that fungi are the universe recyclers, it's why life is eternal. That's what Stamets
said.
So I guess we can assume some part of Hugh has been meshed within the mycelial network and has been regenerated in some way to where he exists within the mycelial network. This is intriguing.
It's intriguing.
But I'm anxious to see how this intersects with the main myth arc.
Yeah.
Because right now, Stamets' story seems to be on the sideline.
Yes.
Which this early in a season is perfectly fine. But eventually that side narrative is going to have to not just run parallel, but intersect with the main myth arc. So as long as that happens, I'm fine with what they're doing. It's definitely intriguing, and it's got me thinking. So I'm anxious to see what they do with that.
Yeah, I was really a big fan of Stamets this episode because, like, you know, what that character is going through right now is very relatable to a lot of people. It dealing with the loss of a loved one or anything, you always basically feel, you try to come up with these explanations of the loss. And that's what I saw in Stamets this episode, is kind of like he's suffering from survivor's guilt because, you know, Hugh died, and and Stamets witnessed, just like what he said, he witnessed him getting killed and couldn't do anything. And then he sees him in the mycelial spectrum, but then he tells Tilly, but the last time he's been there, he never saw him again.
Right. So what do you think it means? Are you agreeing with me? Are you saying that in fact he is alive in some way?
I think he's alive in some way because this is Star Trek.
Yeah, well, if the cells have regenerated, then there's a part of his consciousness that I think is alive
still there
in the network. Yeah. But this brings me to a very interesting thought, Dave, because I'm surprised that Discovery is still using the spore drive. And it looks as if it's going to be a permanent thing now, because Tilly at the end of this episode found a way to harness the dark matter and use it to power the spore drive.
Yeah.
Now, you and I have spoken about how they will rid themselves of the spore drive since the first episode aired last year when it was introduced. I'm sorry, the third episode of last year when it was introduced, because it just can't exist in the world of Star Trek. And if they were to get rid of it, last year would have been the most logical time due to the heavy ethical implications that using the spore drive presented, both to the tardigrade and what they were doing to the mycelial network, and of course the fact that they're attaching it to a human being, which the Federation and Starfleet says that's a no-no. It's looking more and more, though, like the short Trek episode Calypso could in fact be the true fate of Discovery, a ship lost in time, because how else are you going to get rid of this highly advanced vessel that did not exist?
That was the thing that I was starting to think about too, is kind of like, okay, they brought back the spore drive. So what we know in Calypso is Discovery was lost. It's a ghost ship. It was abandoned, and its captain told the ship to stay here. So
I'm thinking that it's going to, in fact, be the true destiny of the ship of Discovery, because Dave, last year, like I said, perfect time to just kind of, all right, we're done with it. And this is why, and for me, it worked as an audience, as a Star Trek fan. I was like, okay, so they're going to retire and mothball the spore drive because it's highly dangerous. That satisfied me as a Star Trek continuity baby. I was like, well, that works. I'm fine with that. But now they have pretty much stated that they're going to keep using it, especially now that they don't have to use Stamets to power it, if I understood the ending correctly. So now we have all these questions again. Well, here's the spore drive, and they found a stable way of using it. Now suddenly we have that mystery again. Well, how is the Discovery going to, how is this ship going to actually stay around when this technology doesn't exist in later episodes of Star Trek? And yes, it's a very easy fix, but I'm surprised that they didn't just allow it to slowly slip away into obscurity after last season.
I'm glad you brought this up, because I actually thought about this, and as a fanboy, I actually thought, what if we all know that Section 31 is going to be a big series that's coming up after Discovery Season 2, and it's supposed to center around Georgiou, but we don't know what the narrative might be. What is the whole point of Section 31? What if the series of Section 31 is to explain what happens to the spore drive? Because that in itself, that spore drive technology is super powerful. It's more powerful than warp technology. So for it to just utterly disappear in Star Trek history is odd.
Yeah.
So I was like thinking to myself, I wonder if they'll use this narrative of the spore drive.
You think Section 31 will play a part in
Section 31
in getting rid of the spore drive?
Why would Georgiou return to the Discovery?
Yeah, unless she needs the spore drive.
Unless she needs the spore drive. Because I thought about this. We're all excited about Captain Georgiou or Queen Georgiou coming back, but what's her motivation to come back? She's not going to come back because of Burnham. That doesn't make any sense.
To be hot, Dave. That's why she's coming back. She's coming back to
have sex with some aliens.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm like, oh yeah, eat some Kelpian next to me.
Yeah. She wants to eat the lone Kelpian.
She's gonna start, as soon as she pops onto the bridge, she's gonna start gnawing on Saru. She's all, what? I thought you guys brought me an appetizer. What's going on here? And then Saru's all, Captain, I have tube steak. You can gnaw on that if you'd like, Captain.
What happens if Pike has sex with Georgiou?
Oh, it's over. I can. Oh man, I'm not into fan fiction necessarily, but I will ship the hell out of that. Throw a little bit of Tilly in there and Detmer. Oh, we got a party. Captain Pike, Georgiou, Tilly, and Detmer. I can get behind that for sure.
Star Trek XXX Discovery.
Let's start writing it right now. Okay, so live read. Get more Star Trek from the holodeck every single month with the Patreon subscription via Rain Man Digital. Head over to patreon.com/RainManDigital and pledge $5 or more a month and gain access to more Star Trek from the holodeck discussions, ranging from comic book breakdowns to Star Trek novel breakdowns, discussions on Star Trek philosophy and themes. We do it all, and we cover it all on our Patreon page, patreon.com/RainManDigital. Pledge $5 or more a month. Help us keep the lights on, and by doing so, you gain access to more content. All right, Dave, so let's take this show down the Tilly road. What is going on with Tilly? She's seeing dead people, Dave? Okay, so was Stamets' explanation dual serving? Did the spore drive and the mycelial network find a way to bring back a part of Tilly's old friend that had died? Whatever it was, it felt benevolent. It didn't seem evil. It didn't seem like it wanted to do Tilly any harm.
Yeah.
It seemed like it wanted to help her. I don't think it's really her friend at all, though. That's how I'm leaning. There's something off about it. The way they wrote the character came off as faux, not real. The moment she was introduced, the mood shifted and she acted less like a real person and more like what you think a real person should act like, which is what a lot of higher intelligent sentient life forms do.
Yes.
This is a representation of what I think humans should act like. Hi, I'm Smiley and I'm really odd looking and I'm very over the top. Dude, I knew something was up with her. It was very Twilight Zone-ish, the way she acted.
I'm telling you.
What are your theories? What do you think? Do you think this is the Red Angel, or do you think it's something completely different?
I think it's completely different. I think it's the Q continuum.
Okay, Dave.
I've stated that they are going to call back to the Q continuum.
I will give you this. Hold on, let my nerd chills go away for a second, because I got some when you said Q continuum. Dave, I find it really hard to separate my Star Trek fanboy right now from critique podcaster, Dave. I don't know. A part of me says yes, Q continuum, please. But then the logical side of me, who reviews things, says, it's just too fucking much. It's too much right now.
But it would make sense, and it would actually. It is something that they could use in Star Trek lore.
I did think of Q Continuum when she started talking to Tilly. It did feel like a Q.
Oh, dude! Not only that, I started thinking about it with how Stamets and Hugh talked about Hugh.
Mm-hmm.
I was like going, what if Stamets was like saying the mycelium network, it was something that he jumps through, right? What happens if the mycelium network, could the mycelium network be a key to the Q continuum, to their plane of existence?
It's a very powerful thing. And the continuum, yes, is very omnipresent, very godlike, but essentially they're just another alien species that's very evolved. So
I will
knows?
Clap if Q shows up in Discovery. I will be such a giddy little fanboy if all of a sudden you hear a snap and all of a sudden flash.
I don't know, man. I'm torn. I'm torn when it comes to that. I'm leaning to the fact that it's a part. It's the mycelial network. I believe that person popped up after she got hurt, right?
Yes.
I'm thinking something.
And she was touched by the black matter.
Yes, I'm thinking something hit her. It's an alien. Maybe found a way to communicate with her through the mycelial network. That's kind of what I'm thinking.
But here's the thing, though. Why would the alien do it, for one thing? And do we know of any alien species that would do this for the humanity?
Maybe the alien species was trapped in that asteroid for some reason. You got to remember, they are still baffled. They're still baffled as to why the asteroid lit up the computer screen when it came to the mycelial network. They said this asteroid has the same effect as the tardigrade.
Yes.
So there's something about that asteroid that is special. Maybe there's a life form trapped inside. Who knows, dude? Either one of these options we're speculating about now, I feel works. The Q continuum aspect is a little dangerous, but it could still work as well. It's a very winding and dangerous road where you can just fall off and die in a miserable fire and drown. So if I was a writer, Dave, I'll tell you right now, I don't have the balls to do it. If I was a writer on Discovery, I'm like, no, Q, stay away from him. Stay away from him.
No, that's why I was like, the last 2 episodes, I have this wild theory that basically, I told this to somebody and they said, that is the most crackpot, but interesting idea I've ever heard.
Yeah.
I told them, you know what's going to happen in the season finale of season 2? You're going to find out the Red Angel is actually, we are going to witness the birth of Q.
You know what, Dave? Listen. Your fanboy is showing, okay? I'm just going to say
I know.
And usually I
have fun with this.
I like your theories and I like this one, but I think you're getting way too close to it. I think you're starting to say what you want to happen, and not what should happen.
Because I'm sorry, this would actually be really cool.
It would, Dave, but like I said, it could end in a fiery death. All right. So outside of the story, I got to mention the use of transitions this week. We got some visually seamless transitions in this episode. The moment when Pike and Burnham were called to the bridge and the camera moved us from the ready room to the bridge with a clever camera movement and a quick edit. Yeah, and then Burnham
mash cut
and Pike were walking onto the bridge. Also, my absolute favorite was when the camera was drifting below the Discovery into the sky and down toward Terralysium, and ends with the away team transporting down into the city. Just amazing. I've always been a big fan of transitions. They are an underrated part of the filmmaking process, and they are vital to a proper edit when you're editing your show.
Oh, absolutely.
And for those people that may not know what a transition is, it's simply a way that the editor, usually guided by the director, chooses to go from one scene to the next. And most of the time, you got the traditional cuts. You just go from one scene to the next, and it's that easy. But then you have those directors that want to dazzle you during every moment of the episode.
Yeah.
And they give you these very, I want to say, artistic transitions that are very seamless and fluid. And we got several of those this week. And I have to say, that's got to be Jonathan Frakes, because we didn't get those transitions last episode at all. So we had some great transitions. I'm hoping we do more. I'm a big fan of transitions. A great show that can serve it as an example of what I mean by transitions is Spartacus, the show that aired a few years back on Starz. Google Spartacus and just watch their transitions. Every transition they use is a piece of art. They never do a regular transition. Just, okay, we're going to cut to the next thing. They do something elaborate and well thought out. And I like when they do that for a few reasons. Not only is it eye candy and it makes me creatively happy, but it also shows a complete ownership over your product. It shows the complete creative control over a piece of work, that you have everything so mapped out and planned that you even have your transitional cues mapped out to a T.
Yeah, because the use of transitions in film and TV making and film and TV production, the use of transitions really does help the way people view your production value.
And not just
really does. It's a lost art.
Yes,
because it separates like shows that are cookie cutter on like network TV, and then takes it to that next level of like HBO and Game of Thrones and Discovery. Discovery, for me, the one thing I've always told people is like, Now, when I look at Discovery, I cannot picture Discovery on network TV because the production value is way too high. I mean, you have these like brilliant cuts of editing that they do. The cinematography is just out of this planet. Like, you don't see some of the cinematography that they choose to use in Discovery in normal everyday network TV.
Yeah. And the great thing about transitions as well is not only are they just eye-pleasing, but also they can be used as a way to also help tell your story. And that's something that you and I talk a lot about as well, is that there's more than one way to tell your story than just the obvious, which is the script. There's the use of camera. There's the use of sound. There's a use of anthropomorphism, zoomorphism. It just depends on what you're doing with your characters and story. There's so many different things you can utilize to help tell your story, and transitions is just yet another tool in the toolbox of a filmmaker that will help create a vibe, a style, a feeling. And that's why proper transitions are very important, because they can also instill or evoke certain feelings. Certain feelings.
They affect the tone.
Yes, for sure.
Tone is something that basically I think a lot of filmmakers take for granted because they think tone just naturally happens. No, it doesn't. Tone is set by the way you light things, the way you cut, the way you deliver a form of dialogue. All that stuff has to come together to develop the type of tone that you want for your project. And you got to remember, Kurtzman has been saying he is wanting to establish tone for every single series of Star Trek from here on out. And all the tone has to be different. That smash cut that they did from the ready room to the bridge, that really for me was actually the perfect type of cut you would need for the series that Kurtzman is trying to portray. You got to remember, Discovery is supposed to be kind of like this, a callback to the original series. It's high action, it's flashy, I'm trying to think of a word for it, but it's supposed to be a high energy type of tone. And when they use that cut from the bridge to the ready room, I'm like, oh, okay, yep, there it is. There's that. Here we go. It's almost like sitting in a roller coaster and you're just waiting for the roller coaster to go up and you hit that peak. I noticed that basically when they did that smash cut, that's like the roller coaster going downhill, and all of a sudden now we're getting the full ride of Discovery. Here we go.
Yeah. And that's something Discovery never has lacked. Even the first season, they're overall, like, it's called mise en scène. That's what it is when you're taking into account everything that a filmmaker is putting into their project: sound design, cinematography, lighting, all of the things that go into creating the mood, motif, style of your film. They're all important, and transitions is just more of that. So I just want to bring that to light because it's something that we don't really talk about a lot. It's something that a lot of people don't really talk about, even when they're breaking down the academic merits of, say, a feature film or a TV show. All right, Dave, so let's move into final thoughts. Let's start with you. Give me your final thoughts on the episode in a nutshell. We've already kind of droned on for quite a bit.
Well, my final thoughts on this episode, I think this is probably one of the strongest episodes to date for Discovery. And whether it's my favorite episode right now, that's kind of up in the air, but I definitely think it is one of the better episodes, one of the best episodes of Discovery, because it feels like Star Trek. You have this great moment where now in Star Trek we question the Prime Directive, but we don't say whether it's bad or good. We actually give two perspectives of what the Prime Directive is, and the writers left it up to the audience to make up their own minds.
That's right. It's not about them preaching to us. It's about them presenting arguments and then leaving it up to us to interpret.
And just like what you alluded to earlier, I mean, after this, it was amazing seeing not the trollish debates, but honest to God, well thought out talks and debates and everything about what is the Prime Directive? Why does it work? Why do I believe in it? Why do I not believe in it? And people like going, well, okay, yeah, I can see your point of view of that. So overall, I think, again, Jonathan Frakes is one of my favorite directors when it comes to Star Trek. He knows what Star Trek's all about, and he does it. He's a master at telling a Star Trek story. So overall, I would give the episode a solid A+. It stands alone by itself. You can watch this episode and not have to really know Star Trek to really enjoy this episode. That's what I noticed about it as well, was the writing was on par to try to tell its own narrative while continuing the overall narrative.
You mean the Star Trek overall story of Star Trek?
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, Dave, this is probably, and I needed to take a day after watching it so I can say this with absolute certainty. But I feel strongly about this episode, meaning I think it might be the best episode of Star Trek Discovery to date. Between the first season and this season, it might be the best episode we've gotten, just because it's littered with all the greatest Star Trek tropes, the things that make Star Trek Star Trek. I love the use of the crew. I'm so happy that we are learning more about the Discovery crew. Each one has a part to play. And 2 weeks in a row now, they have brought attention to the entire crew of Discovery and not just bringing focus on one. Yeah. I like that. It's showing them all work together as a team. And that's what it's about. I mean, Star Trek in many ways is about the unity of individuals, the unity of species, and the ability to work together as a team in harmony. And that's what I've witnessed the last 2 weeks on Discovery. So brilliant episode. It's an A+ episode. Jonathan Frakes killed this episode. Just knocked it out the park. I'm hoping we get some more Franks this season, without a doubt.
Yeah, same here.
All right, I want to thank everybody for listening to our discussions on Discovery. Please, if you miss any part of this broadcast, find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, and leave us reviews. Add us to your favorites. Share the show with your friends. Share it on social media. The more shares we get, the more traction we gain, the more relevance we build. And then suddenly we start ranking on the charts, right?
Yep.
And that's what we need to do. So I want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you, David.
Thank you. Live long and prosper.
I couldn't help but notice your pain. My pain? It runs deep. Share it with me.
End simulation.